Part 1. The arrival of the primitive soldiers. 1100 words. The Galactic Dominion was the most powerful force in the galaxy. It was made up of many alien species who had come together to create peace, order, and technology far beyond what most planets could imagine. For hundreds of years, the Dominion had been fighting small rebellions and keeping dangerous species in check. They had advanced weapons, powerful spaceships, and armies made of highly trained soldiers from all over the galaxy. Then one day, a strange new species applied to join the Dominion. Humans. At first, the Galactic Council didn't take Earth very seriously. They had watched Earth's broadcasts, old war films, documentaries, and history videos. To the aliens, humans looked like primitive, aggressive creatures who wore bulky metal suits and used weapons that fired chunks of metal instead of energy. It seemed like something out of the past. Still, Earth had reached the stars, developed space travel, and united under one flag. So the Council voted to allow humans into the Dominion, but only on a trial basis. Earth would have to prove itself. They would be allowed to join a mission on the front lines of the Bractal Rebellion, a bloody conflict happening on a rocky mining planet called Varno K-6.2, the Dominion. This was a test. To the humans, it was their first chance to show what they could do. The first look. When the human soldiers landed on Varnek 6, the Dominion forces were already there. They came from many species, some insect-like, some reptilian, some machine-based. All of them were equipped with sleek, glowing armor that fit tightly to their bodies. Their armor was made of nanofibers, quantum mesh, and had energy shields built in. They could jump higher, run faster, and survive plasma blasts. Then the humans stepped off their dropship. The Dominion soldiers froze. The humans looked like walking tanks. Their armor was big, thick, and heavy. It didn't glow. It didn't have sleek designs. It looked like slabs of metal stacked together. Their boots were wide and reinforced. Their helmets looked bulky. Their guns looked like they came from an ancient war museum. The Dominion soldiers began laughing. One alien sergeant, who looked like a giant beetle, tapped on a human's shoulder armor and chuckled. "You going into a volcano or a war zone?" Another alien joked. "Hope you brought a fan in that oven." The humans didn't say much. They didn't argue or brag. They just smiled and got into formation. Private Darius Locke, one of the youngest. Human soldiers heard the laughter through his helmet's audio system, but he kept walking forward, calm and focused. Why the laughter? The aliens weren't trying to be cruel, they just didn't understand. In the Dominion military, soldiers used advanced tech. Their weapons fired plasma or energy beams. Their armor was designed for speed and agility, with shields that could block enemy attacks. Dominion tactics focused on fast strikes, dodging enemy fire, and overwhelming foes with superior tech. Human technology seemed old. Their guns used gunpowder and bullets, chunks of metal fired at high speeds. Their armor didn't have shields, didn't glow or repair itself. It just looked like heavy steel with thick layers to the aliens. It was like seeing a knight from ancient Earth history dropped into a futuristic battlefield. They thought humans were outdated. They thought humans would be slow. They thought humans would die quickly. The human mindset, but what the aliens didn't know was that humanity had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Earth's history was filled with brutal conflicts. Humans had fought in deserts, jungles, mountains, frozen tundras, and cities. They had used everything from sticks and stones to tanks and nuclear weapons. Their armor wasn't designed to look pretty. It was built for survival. It was thick not to impress, to protect. It didn't rely on energy shields because shields could fail. Steel and ceramic didn't. It was tested in heat, dust, cold, and mud, and most importantly, humans knew pain. And they knew how to fight through it. The mission begins. The mission was to attack and take back an area controlled by the Bractal rebels. The Bractal were a dangerous enemy. They had stolen Dominion technology and built their own powerful weapons. They had taken over several mining zones on Varnik 6 and turned them into fortresses. The combined Dominion human force was supposed to work together, as the soldiers loaded into transports and marched toward the battlefield. The Dominion troops moved quickly and gracefully. Their armor shimmered in the sunlight. Their weapons floated beside them using anti-gravity. They looked like warriors from a high-tech dream. The humans, on the other hand, moved slower. Their heavy armor clanked with every step. Their guns were big, loud, and needed to be reloaded by hand. They looked like they were carrying the weight of a car on their shoulders. The aliens chuckled again. One whispered, "They won't last 10 minutes." Another added, "Hope their armor doesn't melt when the shooting starts." But again the humans said nothing. The calm before the storm as they approached the rebel stronghold. The sky darkened with smoke from burning outposts. The ground shook with distant explosions. High above, gunships circled, scanning for enemy positions. Private Darius Locke looked around at the other soldiers. He could hear the Dominion troops joking on the shared radio channel. He could feel the tension, but inside his helmet, he felt calm. He reached up and clicked a button on his chest. His heads-up display zoomed in on the ridge ahead, marking enemy locations. His suit's cooling system kicked in. His fingers tightened around his rifle. Then the first plasma shot came screaming from the enemy bunker. It was time ending. Note for part 1. And in that moment, as the first blast of war lit up the sky, all the laughter stopped. The humans didn't run. They didn't panic. They advanced, and soon, the aliens would learn that those walking ovens weren't a joke. They were the future of war. Part 2. First contact with the enemy, 1100 words. The battlefield of Varnic 6 was not a friendly place. The ground was sharp and broken, covered in jagged rocks and black ash. The sky was filled with dark clouds and smoke from previous battles. The air was thick and smelled like burning metal and oil. This was where the Bractal rebels had made their home. The Bractal were a strong and angry alien race. They had once been part of the Galactic Dominion, but they had rebelled when their demands for independence were rejected. Now, they had their own weapons, stolen from the Dominion, and had turned parts of Varnic 6 into heavily armed fortresses. The mission for the combined Dominion and human troops was clear: take back the land and crush the rebellion. But nobody expected what happened next. The battle begins as the soldiers moved into the combat zone. Enemy fire suddenly exploded from the cliffs and bunkers ahead. Bright green plasma bolts shot through the air. The Bractal weren't holding back. They were trying to wipe out the entire force in one go. The Dominion soldiers immediately reacted, diving for cover and activating their energy shields. Their armor glowed as it absorbed hits, but the plasma was strong, too strong. A Dominion warrior from the Garen species, who had been sprinting toward a rocky hill, was hit mid-jump. The plasma bolts sliced through his shield like paper and cut him in half. His glowing armor clattered to the ground in pieces. Panic spread quickly. The sleek, high-tech Dominion armor, which everyone believed was the best in the galaxy, was failing. The bractoplasma weapons were too powerful. The shields overloaded and short-circuited. Soldiers were hit left and right from behind rocks and bunkers. The Bractal were winning, but the humans didn't run then. Something strange happened. The humans didn't stop. They didn't scream or dive. For cover like the others, they kept walking forward. Step by step. Slow and steady, they marched across the battlefield like metal giants. Plasma bolts hit them, some bounced off. Others left black burn marks, but none of the shots went through the armor. The thick plating, layered with heat-resistant ceramic and alloyed steel, absorbed the blasts. The humans didn't even flinch. A Bractal commander, watching through a targeting scope, was confused. "Why aren't they falling?" he growled. The answer was simple. Their armor was made for this. While Dominion armor was designed to move fast and avoid hits, human armor was built to take hits and keep going, and then the humans started shooting. Humans finally reached firing range, and then came a sound the aliens had never heard before. Thunder. It wasn't plasma, wasn't a clean, soft hum like energy weapons. It was loud, violent, and terrifying. The air shook as human rifles fired their first rounds. Bang, bang, bang. Each shot sounded like a hammer slamming against the sky. The bullets, made of high-density tungsten, screamed through the air at supersonic speed. They tore through Bractal cover, sliced into their armor, and knocked enemies off their feet. The Bractal had prepared to fight energy weapons. Their armor had energy absorbers and reflectors, but that did nothing against pure, raw kinetic force. A Bractal soldier tried to duck behind a rock, only to have a bullet punch through the stone and into his chest. Another aimed his plasma gun, but a burst of bullets shattered the weapon and ripped through his limbs. It was brutal. It was effective. Dominion soldiers in shock behind their cover. Dominion soldiers watched in disbelief. These humans who they had laughed at just hours ago were walking through a storm of plasma and returning fire with deadly accuracy. They didn't need to dodge. They didn't need shields. They just kept moving forward, shooting and winning. A Threxery officer, whose energy shield had just failed, ducked next to a large human trooper and shouted, "Are you even taking damage?" The human turned his helmet and replied calmly through the cums, "Scratched my paint." Then he stood up, aimed his rifle, and fired a single shot. Somewhere in the distance, a Bractal gun turret exploded. The Dominion soldiers were in awe. They had always believed in speed and technology, but these humans had shown them something they had forgotten. Sometimes, the old ways still work. A battle. Of styles, the battle now had two very different styles. The Dominion, fast, smart, but fragile. Their weapons were light, their armor was thin, and they relied on avoiding hits. The humans, slow, heavy, and nearly unstoppable. Their guns shook the ground. Their armor made them walking tanks. As more Bractal fell, the tide began to turn. The rebels, once confident, were now afraid. Plasma rifles were overheating. Ammunition was running low. Their shots weren't stopping the humans. Every blast that hit them just made them angrier. Bractal squads began falling back, retreating into their bunkers. The human charged, but the humans didn't give them time to hide. "Move up," Sergeant Mendoza shouted. The humans began their final push. Heavy footsteps pounded the dirt. Rockets launched from human shoulder cannons. Grenades rolled into Bractal hideouts. One by one, the enemy positions were destroyed. Private Locke, who had never been in battle before today, marched through. Smoke and fire. His helmet's display lit up with enemy markers, and he picked them off one by one. Bang. Reload. Bang. Move forward. He wasn't scared. He was trained. His armor kept him alive. His squad fought like a single machine. They had planned for this. They had trained for this. This was what human soldiers were made for. End of the battle. After only an hour of fighting, the Bractal line was broken. The few who survived either ran or surrendered. Human medics moved in, treating wounded Dominion. Soldiers, engineers began clearing debris. The first major stronghold had been taken, and not a single human had fallen. The Dominion troops gathered in silence. Many were still shaking. Others just stared at the human soldiers, who were now casually reloading and checking their gear. Like it was any other day. The laughter that had once filled the air was gone. Now there was only respect. Part 3. The sound of old guns, 1100 words. The battle at Varnick 6 had taken a strange turn. What was supposed to be an easy win for the Bractal rebels quickly became their worst nightmare. At first they had been confident. Their stolen Dominion. Plasma weapons had destroyed energy shields and armor before. They had dug into strong bunkers and prepared heavy turrets. Everything was in place for an easy victory. But then the humans arrived, and everything changed. A new kind of weapon. The Bractal were ready to face energy weapons. That's what they had trained against: bright beams of light, slow charges, and shimmering projectiles. Their armor could reflect or absorb most of those attacks. But the humans didn't use energy weapons. They used something older, simpler. They used guns that shot. Metal bullets. The sound was completely different. There were no soft zaps or electronic whines. Instead, there were loud bangs, deep and thunderous, echoing across the battlefield like a storm every time a human soldier fired. The air cracked like lightning. The Bractal were confused at first. They had never heard such weapons before. But confusion quickly turned to fear when those metal slugs began punching through their armor. One Bractal captain, hiding behind thick cover, peeked out to fire his plasma rifle. Before he could shoot, a bullet smashed through his chest plate. He fell backward, gasping, as blood poured from the hole. Their weapons, they pierce armor, he choked out before dying. It didn't take long for the rest of the Bractal to realize the truth. Their cover didn't protect them. Their armor couldn't stop the bullets, and the humans didn't stop coming. The unstoppable advanced human soldiers moved slowly, but nothing could stop them. Plasma blasts hit them again and again, but their armor absorbed the heat or spread it across special ceramic layers. Their helmets stayed cool. Their suits stayed strong to the Bractal. It was like fighting walking tanks. Sergeant Mendoza led the charge through a ruined trench. A Bractal machine gun fired at him from above. Plasma bolts hit him square in the chest, over and over, but he didn't stop. He raised his rifle, aimed carefully, and fired 3 shots. Each one found its mark. The gun fell silent. So did the Bractal. A nearby Dominion officer, bleeding and crouching behind a rock, stared in disbelief. They just walk through fire like it's rain, he whispered. The humans didn't yell or scream. They didn't panic or rush. They moved like machines, calm, trained. Deadly dot. The power of human training, one of the secrets behind the human success, wasn't just their armor, it was their training. Humans had spent generations fighting wars. From ancient swords and arrows to modern tanks and aircraft, they had learned everything about strategy, survival, and adaptation. Their military schools were tough. Soldiers were pushed to their limits. They trained for every type of environment: frozen mountains, burning deserts, dark jungles, ruined cities. They didn't rely on technology alone. They learned discipline, teamwork, and precision. Private Darius Locke, though young, was a perfect example. He was nervous before the battle began, but once the bullets started flying, he remembered his training. He kept his formation, checked his corners. He stayed behind cover when needed and advanced when ordered, and every time he fired, he hit his target. A different kind of firepower. The human weapons looked simple to alien eyes. Just big, heavy guns with barrels and magazines. But inside, they were complex machines designed for speed and power. They used kinetic energy force from speed and mass. Instead of melting armor with heat, they broke it apart with raw impact. Bractal armor, made to absorb plasma heat, was useless against this. Even the Dominion began to notice. One alien engineer, watching footage of the battle later, said, "Their bullets do not ask for permission. They do not care about shields. They simply break everything." It was true. Energy weapons were elegant. Human weapons were brutal. And on Varnak 6, brutal worked better. Fear in the enemy ranks soon. Fear spread through the Bractal army. Entire squads refused to advance. Some even tried to flee back to the mountains. The moment they heard the loud crack of human rifles, they dove for cover if there was any left. The Bractal commander, angry and panicking, ordered his elite units to hold the line. They are only human, he shouted. Crush them. But his words had no effect. His best troops tried to hold their bunkers. But when the humans reached them, the bunkers fell one after another. The eyes of the Dominion back at the command center. Ranking Dominion officers watched the battle. Through live drone feeds, what they saw left them speechless. They had laughed at human armor, called it walking ovens, said it was too slow, it was too old. Now they watched as that same armor withstood direct hits from advanced plasma cannons. They watched as human soldiers fought with incredible courage and precision. They saw Bractal troops break and run when human firepower hit. General Threxel, a respected Dominion leader, turned to his staff and said quietly, "We were wrong." A new level of respect, After the last Bractal gun nest was destroyed, the battlefield fell silent. Dominion soldiers emerged from their hiding spots, some still trembling. Human medics moved in, helping the wounded Dominion and human alike. The humans checked their gear, reloaded their weapons, and stood by for further orders. Not one of them acted like a hero. They simply did their job. That quiet professionalism impressed everyone. Even the wounded Dominion soldiers looked at them differently now. One alien, bandaged and weak, nodded at a passing human and whispered, "Thank you." The human nodded back and kept walking. The galaxy takes notice. Word of the battle spread quickly. Ships orbiting above recorded the entire fight. Videos were sent to military bases across the Dominion. Commanders, scientists, and soldiers everywhere watched in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this. The phrase began to spread from planet to planet, spoken in hushed voices. Don't laugh at the armor. Not until the shooting starts. Once looked like a joke was now seen as genius. The humans had brought a weapon the galaxy had forgotten. Fearless soldiers. Brutal firepower. An armor that didn't need to run because it could survive. Closing thoughts of Part 3, the Dominion had advanced tech, glowing weapons, and energy shields. But in the end, it was the humans, with their heavy armor and roaring rifles, who turned the tide. They didn't look like much at first, didn't talk big, but when the shooting started, they became something terrifying. They became unstoppable. Part 4. The turning tide. 1100 words. The battle for Varnic 6 had started with laughter. Dominion soldiers had mocked human armor, calling it slow, ugly, and outdated. But after just one fight against the Bractal rebels, everything changed. The Bractal had used powerful plasma weapons to break through Dominion shields and armor. Many advanced soldiers had fallen. But the humans, wearing heavy, old-style armor and carrying simple-looking guns, had not only survived, they had taken the fight to the enemy. Now, the battlefield had grown quiet. Fires still burned, smoke still rose, but the humans stood strong. Their armor was dented, burned, and scratched, but they were alive, and now they were planning to go on the offensive. The brief inside. A temporary command post set up in a crater. Dominion Commander Threxel and human Colonel Ward stood together over a glowing battlefield map. Threxel was tall and thin, his skin a pale blue. He had 4 eyes and long fingers. He was still shaken from the earlier battle, where so many of his troops had fallen. Ward, on the other hand, was calm. He was a middle-aged human, with short gray hair and a deep voice. He had seen many battles before and didn't scare easily. Threxel looked at the map and shook his head. "We can't break their defenses," he said. "We lost half our energy weapons, so our armor isn't holding. Their plasma is too strong." Colonel Ward looked over the map, then simply said, "Then let the humans lead." Threxel stared at him. "Your forces are too slow. You have no shields, no energy blades." Ward smiled slightly. "We don't need them." He tapped a blinking red area on the map. "We'll go right through them." A new plan. The new mission was bold. Humans would lead the next assault. Their target was the Central Bractal Command Bunker. Located deep inside a canyon, Dominion forces would support from a distance. Using snipers and long-range drones, the humans would take point marching through the narrow pass, straight into the enemy's strongest position. To most commanders, this sounded like suicide. But the humans knew better. They didn't need to be fast. They needed to be unstoppable, preparing for the march back at the front line. Human soldiers cleaned their weapons and reloaded magazines. Their armor had been patched, with extra plates. Burn marks and holes were sealed with field tools. Private Locke sat beside his squad, checking his rifle one last time. He was still tired, but there was no fear in his heart. "Ready to go again?" asked Sergeant Mendoza. Locke nodded. "Always." Their suits hissed softly as they powered up. Helmets sealed, visors lit up, targeting systems activated. One by one, the soldiers stood up, tall and armored. Behind them, Dominion troops watched silently. The same soldiers who had laughed earlier now stared with quiet respect, One Dominion sniper muttered, "They're not soldiers. They're tanks with a heartbeat." The march into the canyon as the sun set, the human battalion began its advance. The canyon ahead was filled with sharp rocks, destroyed vehicles, and enemy watchtowers. Bractal scouts saw them coming. They sounded alarms. Cannons rotated. Troops scrambled into position. But the humans didn't stop. They moved forward in perfect formation, step by step, covering each other. Their rifles were ready. Their visors scanned the terrain for traps. Then, the enemy opened fire. Plasma bolts filled the air like a storm of green lightning. The canyon walls lit up as explosions rang out. Dominion soldiers watching from far away held their breath, but the humans kept walking. The return fire then. The thunder returned. Human rifles barked back with raw, brutal force. The sound of bullets slamming into metal and stone echoed through the canyon. Machine guns set up on human walkers opened up, spraying hundreds of rounds in seconds. Bractal gunners screamed as bullets shattered their cover. Their plasma weapons overheated quickly. They had never faced constant pressure like this before. Rockets launched from human shoulder cannons, smashing enemy bunkers into rubble. Drones flew ahead and marked targets with lasers, guiding fire with deadly precision. One Bractal squad tried to flank the humans, but found themselves face to face with a soldier in full armor. He didn't run. He turned, aimed, and fired 3 shots. All 3 Bractal dropped. Holding the line, the Bractal fought fiercely. They launched grenades, fired sniper shots, and sent attack drones screaming through the sky. But no matter what they threw at the humans, nothing worked for long. When a human was knocked down, medics in heavy armor ran through gunfire to pull them back. They carried massive shields built like small walls to block incoming plasma. Human engineers used mobile tools to patch armor on the battlefield. Guns were cleaned and reloaded between cover fire bursts. Grenades were passed like footballs thrown with perfect timing and aim. It was war, yes, but for the humans, it was just another day. Bractal panic inside the Bractal command bunker. Officers shouted over each other. Their central screen showed human soldiers closing in row by row, position by position. Their armor won't break. We've hit them with everything. They're not dying. One Bractal general ordered a retreat. Fall back to the second base. We can't hold. But it was too late. The final push. Colonel Ward gave the signal. Full charge. Break them. The humans didn't cheer. They didn't roar. They just moved fast. For the first time, they ran not because they were afraid, but because the enemy was almost broken. Heavy boots thundered across the canyon floor. Flamethrowers cleared the bunkers. Shotguns roared in close quarters. Human fists, powered by armor servos, smashed through doors. One by one, the Bractal fell. Some surrendered. Some fled. Others were crushed in the storm. Victory. 30 minutes later, the humans stood inside the enemy's command center. Smoke filled the air. Flames crackled in the corners. Enemy weapons lay on the floor, broken, useless. Private Locke looked around. He had survived. So had most of his squad. The human flag was planted on the roof, and the message was clear. They had won. The galaxy realizes the truth. Word of the victory spread faster than light. Fleet commanders, diplomats, and generals across the galaxy received the report. The humans had led the charge. They had taken the most dangerous position, and they had done it with the kind of weapons everyone else had stopped using long ago. General Drexel stood before the Galactic Council days later and said, "We thought they were outdated. We were wrong. They are the warriors we never knew we needed." Part 5. The aftermath and the legend. 1100 words. The battle for Varnic 6 was over. The smoke had settled. The guns had gone quiet. Now the last of the Bractal rebels had either surrendered, fled, or been defeated. The human soldiers stood among the wreckage of the enemy's main base, victorious. Their armor was scratched, burned and dented in places, but it had held strong. Their weapons were still working, some hot from constant use. They had lost a few, yes, but far fewer than expected. The Dominion troops had suffered heavier losses early on. If the humans hadn't stepped in, Varnex 6 would have fallen. Now it was back under Dominion control. Everyone knew the truth. The humans had saved the day. Silent respect, the Dominion. Soldiers were quiet as they watched the humans walk back to the staging area. There were no cheers, no loud celebrations, only nods of respect and quiet stares. Dominion engineers, medics and scouts had heard the stories already, how human armor had taken direct plasma hits, how their rifles punched through. Paper how they had charged through enemy fire without slowing down. One insectoid soldier whispered to another, "They weren't even afraid." Another replied, "They're not like us. They were made for war." And it wasn't just the Dominion troops who felt that way. The council meeting far above Varnex 6. In a large space station orbiting the planet, the Galactic Council gathered. For an emergency meeting, they wanted to understand what had happened. Ambassadors and generals from dozens of species sat around a glowing table, watching battle footage from the fight. They saw the bractal plasma cannons failing to stop the humans. They saw soldiers walking through fire and returning it with raw, brutal power. A slow-motion video played of a human soldier being hit by 3 plasma blasts and still continuing to fire as if nothing had happened. There was silence in the room. Then, Ambassador Euros of the Zarnithi species finally spoke. "We thought they were backward. We thought they were slow." He paused, then looked around the room. "We were wrong." General Threxel, speaks General Threxel. The Dominion officer who had once mocked the humans himself now stood to address the council. He was no longer proud or arrogant. His voice was calm, serious, and full of respect. "At first, I thought their armor was outdated," he admitted. "I believed they would be crushed. I laughed, like many of you." He looked down, ashamed. "But when our shields failed, and our advanced suits burned, it was the humans who stood." He showed a picture on the screen. A human soldier, standing tall, helping a wounded Dominion fighter to safety plasma, burns all over his armor, but still moving strong. "We call them primitive," Threxel continued, "but they are not. They are purposeful. They do not fight for style. They fight to win." Changes begin after the battle. Things started to change across the galaxy. Dominion weapons labs requested samples of human bullets. Scientists began studying kinetic armor against something that had been forgotten for centuries. Military leaders across different planets asked to train with human forces. Human war philosophy became a topic in elite military schools. Resilience, endurance, and shock value were written into new combat strategies. Even Dominion armor. Manufacturers began adding thicker plating and thermal coatings. Just like the human suits, the idea that speed is everything started to fade. The new belief was simple. If you can survive the first attack, you can win the fight. Among the humans, back on Earth, the returning human soldiers were welcomed with pride and honor. Families, leaders, and young cadets watched the reports from Varnex 6 with amazement. But the soldiers themselves didn't act like heroes. They didn't boast or brag. When reporters asked what they had done differently, most answered simply, "We stuck to our training. We trusted the armor. We did our job." Private Darius Locke, once a nervous rookie, was now a battle-hardened veteran. He returned home with a few scars and a head full of memories. When asked by a reporter how it felt to face plasma cannons head-on, he just shrugged. "Felt like a really hot summer day," he joked. Behind the humor, though, was the truth. He had been ready. Because humans always prepare for the worst. The new reputation across the galaxy, a new phrase began to spread among soldiers and commanders. It started as a whisper, then became a warning. If you hear thunder, it's already too late. It meant one thing: the humans had arrived. And with them came the roar of bullets and the march of unstoppable warriors in iron armor. Enemy factions took notice. Rumors spread about the metal men of Earth who didn't fear fire. Some rebel groups began asking if humans were involved before starting a battle. Some even surrendered the moment human troops appeared on scans. One rebel commander wrote in his report, "We're not afraid of Dominion tech. We're not afraid of energy weapons. But if you see a human in full armor, run. Looking ahead, the humans had passed their test. They were no longer just trial members of the Dominion. They were now respected warriors, equals on the battlefield. Dominion High Command invited human generals to planning meetings. They wanted to learn, to adapt, to grow. But even as they did, the humans stayed grounded. Colonel Ward said it best. We don't want to be feared, but if we must fight, fear is a tool we will use. The legacy of the armor in the months that followed, human armor became a symbol, not of power, but of survival, of courage, of never giving up. Even when the fire rains down and the odds look impossible, one Dominion officer, once a critic of Earth, stood before a class of new recruits and said, "Do not judge a soldier by the shine of their armor. Judge them by what they can walk through while wearing it."
Awards.
Final words: the galaxy had seen many wars, many enemies, many victories. But Varnac 6 was different. It was the battle where laughter turned into silence, where doubts turned into respect, where an old way of fighting proved stronger than the newest tech. It was the battle where humans earned a name across the stars. Now, no one laughed at their armor, because everyone knew